Dave Chappelle rang in the new year with a new comedy special. Variety does the write-up here. Dave Chappelle's obsession with mocking trans people continues in new Netflix special, The Dreamer. Quote, I love punching down. I'm just gonna read this and then we'll give our takes on the special since all three of us actually watched it. Maybe it's time for Dave Chappelle to try some new material. The comedian's newest special, The Dreamer, debuted on Netflix on December 31st and largely focuses on his early years in entertainment and how he manifested his success. But he floods the first 12 minutes of the set, revisiting his favorite target in recent years, transgender people. Chappelle opens the special by telling a story about visiting Jim Carrey while he was shooting the 1999 film Man on the Moon, where the actor famously went method on set while portraying comedian Andy Kaufman. Dave recalls being, quote, very disappointed that he spent the day speaking to Carrey, pretending to be Kaufman, ending by saying, that's how trans people make me feel. He then addressed the controversy surrounding his anti-trans material, saying, if you guys came here to this show tonight thinking that I'm going to make fun of those people again, you've come to the wrong show. I'm not fucking with those people anymore. It wasn't worth the trouble. I ain't saying shit about them. Maybe 3 or 4 times tonight, but that's it. I'm tired of talking about them. And I want you to know why I'm tired of talking about them, because these people acted like I needed them to be funny. Well, that's ridiculous. I don't need you. I got a whole new angle coming. You guys will never see this shit coming. I ain't doing trans jokes no more. Then he said he was going to transition to joking about quote unquote handicapped people instead, because they're not as organized as the gays. And I love punching down. Okay, so you get the sense of that. Now, Netflix is unbelievably draconian when it comes to showing clips, and so we can't show any clips. That's why we read the quotes of that piece. Right. To the extent that he got into the trans material and even the disabled jokes, it was as a very self-referential, very meta, and very self-aware kind of troll for exactly the kind of writers who would write an article about that. It was basically his way of saying, I know you guys expect me to say something that pisses you off so you can make a few bucks writing some articles about it. So here it is. And that was basically the extent of it. So it's really much ado about nothing. There is this like industry within an industry of the written press, and to a certain extent, like the YouTube media too, of just giving Dave Chappelle as much hell as possible whenever he opens his mouth, whenever he shows himself. And that's what this is. The special itself was fairly milquetoast on a whole. It was basically 3 or 4 personal stories is really all it was. It's the kind of special that only a guy of Chappelle's stature could get away with doing, because it was a midlife thank you to his hometown fans, saying, hey, this is where I got my start doing comedy, and look how far I've come. Thank you all for getting me here. He told the story about meeting Jim Carrey. He told the story about his travels with Chris Rock in the aftermath of the Will Smith Oscar slap, and then he kind of ends with this story about a run-in with the Russian mob in his early days as a comic, and about how, you know, he had bravery in that situation despite being in a more dangerous situation than he realized, because he's a dreamer, and that's why it's called The Dreamer. It's a nice special. It wasn't one of his best. I don't think it was designed to be one of his best. He didn't mean this as like a major work. Like Woody Allen did that movie Radio Days when he was probably about the same age Chappelle is now, maybe a little older, like 55, about his old neighborhood, about the people he grew up with. It wasn't meant to be an Annie Hall or a Manhattan, or it was just a nice little homage to the people he came up with. That's kind of what this was, a nice thank you to his fans for getting him to where he is. And that's that. As the article writes, 10 minutes tops was devoted to trolling the lib critics who just feel a need to espouse their hatred for Dave Chappelle anytime he surfaces.
Well, I broke my rule, which I think yourself and probably most people who have been in the trenches for a while follow. When I see these dumb fucking libs post, oh, Chappelle has made a 4th special about attacking trans people. You know, I think the lady doth protest too much. I think that he must have had his heart broken by a trans person. Well, Missy, she needs to get over that. And I said, hang on, I thought misgendering is against the rules, isn't it? Why are you misgendering Dave Chappelle? So hang on. So you're attacking him for making these transgender jokes by misgendering him and relying on homophobic tropes. And you can imagine where that went. That is the intellectual quality of people who are particularly exercised about Dave Chappelle making jokes. That first 10 minutes did kill me because he's Dave Chappelle. He's got great craft. His timing, his delivery, like on paper, those jokes are kind of like, yeah, they're funny. In the delivery, and I already knew what they were from reading articles, it still killed me in the way that he presented it. And the whole handicapped bit I thought was pretty funny. And what was funny about it is, here's somebody doing comedy. My understanding of comedy is you push buttons and you cross lines and you fuck with people. And anybody who only saw in that the element of he's making a joke about trans people and not the meta dimension of his commenting on the reaction, which was really the joke. The overall joke was fucking with those people and commenting on the idea of being in a moment where what is the line and why is the line where it is, and can you really not make this joke? What do you think? I'm serious? What do you think? I mean this? Like we talked about it a little on Jimmy's show. You know, it's funny to troll the libs because they're censorious the way that the Jerry Falwell people were and still are, but they just don't have the cultural prominence that they used to. When they did, they were the target. Now, right. These are the censorious people.
Was funny. Bruno was very funny because it was crossing a certain line of, sexual norms at a time when the Christian right was still relatively powerful in this country. Yeah.
Right. And this is funny because it's attacking a very similar censorious, almost fanatical religious movement of people with absolutely no sense of humor, no sense of irony, no sense of nuance. That's why none of the articles that I've seen seem to understand those jokes, or they willfully don't understand them. Like they're really not about what they're about. They're a commentary on this moment we're in where you're not supposed to make these jokes. And as you pointed out, that's not even what the special was. It's not even what it was. Most of the special was him, yes, talking about reflecting on his life like a middle-aged man will do at that moment in life. That's a good comparison, Woody Allen with Radio Days. And with all of his specials, remember, Dave Chappelle came out of a performing arts high school. He has some background in drama. He's very theatrical. So he always does a bit of a dramatic monologue structure in these comedy specials. So it has an arc. And I thought the opening was really funny. I thought the end was very strong dramatically, as he can be when he wants to be. I thought the middle dragged. Yeah. That was how, yeah.
Tusker,
that was my take.
I thought that as far as the jokes and the comedy and that type of stuff, yes, it was the opening that was kind of packed with most of the funny bits, and then you were treated to sort of his recollections going through the same thing that you've said. It was a memoir. He threw in some jokes, but that's really what it was. It was a stage memoir with some jokes thrown in, and for that medium, then I think it was very well. If you were expecting just a raucous 60-minute comedy special, then it's not for you, Right. And I think the other thing, as far as like the commentary, like him like doing the transition to talking about handicapped people, the thing is that these liberals never understand that he would have done that one joke. If they didn't make a big deal out of it, he wouldn't have spent however many other times doing it. It's your outrage that is fueling people to do this. It's sort of the exact same thing with Trump. It's Trump.
You know, and it's very interesting to me that none of these articles that are very much coming out of a point of view and a philosophy of we live in a world of heteronormative cis white people and everybody else. None of them comment on how black and brown that audience that was like pissing itself at those jokes was. Huh.
Well, the other theme
is
that
it still is it still white supremacy? Is that the problem there?
The other theme that Chappelle often visits, in the closer, he talked about how he got into an altercation with a gay woman, I think at a bar or something. And she called the police, and he said, they're gay until it's time to call the cops, and then they're white again.
Right.
And the point of that was to talk a little bit about what Russell's talking about, which is he kind of deconstructs and picks apart a very simplistic view of the world, which is that every marginalized group united ideologically and politically against white people. And that was what he was exploring there in that disabled joke, where he's joking that there is a disabled person who's transphobic who's there to hear anti-trans jokes,
to laugh at
and now
trans
he's
people.
at the receiving end of a joke. So it was sort of, in line with that thematically. And so that was the point he was clearly like trying to make, and he did make it. It was very meta. It was very self-referential. It was very self-aware. And he knew that in doing that, he would get a rise out of people who he then got a rise out of, and he proved them right. But yeah, I mean, overall, this is just a lot of ink spilled amongst the usual suspects who, feel a need to do this every time he rears his head. And part of the reason why I think they feel a need to go after him as much as they do is the fact that, he does complicate their very, very simplistic narrative that they like to put out, a very simplistic view of the world. And, one thing that George Carlin always used to say is that the point of a comedian is to establish where the line is, to cross it with the audience, you walk the audience across the line, and then, and he always added this, and this is what made him so brilliant. He said, you can't just cross the line. You have to make the audience glad that they crossed the line with you. You have to expose them to momentary discomfort and then make them realize that it's okay to cross the line and that we're all okay at the end. Now, part of the construct of that closer special, and I said this at the time, is that if you watch that to the end, you saw where he was going, where he told this very poignant and really devastatingly tragic story about a trans comic who he befriended and mentored, and I won't give it away, partly because we're in East Berlin, but partly because I think you should watch it, to find out exactly what I'm talking about. That was after an hour of pretty antagonistic material. And if you're doing a special on Netflix, Netflix is the least captive audience on earth, because if they get offended by something, they could just turn it off without watching all the way through. It's not the same medium as stand-up comedy, which is in a theater where people come to see you, and it's going to take a lot for them to actually walk out. Right? Here on YouTube, if we bore you guys for a second, you turn us off. You go watch The Vanguard, right? So we can't afford to.
Maybe not The Vanguard.
Maybe not The Vanguard. I'm joking, but
apparently they went after us again.
Yeah, they made fun of our Led Zeppelin cover. That's all right. They need the material. It was good that we did that for them. Actually, they threw them a bone. Yeah.
I mean, now they're just clout chasing.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're just cloud chasing. But no, like the point is, like, when you extend that very antagonistic material for an hour and then you sort of bury the real meaning of the special in the last 10 minutes, that's a calculated risk that you take. And that's an example where the medium of stand-up doesn't really match the medium that most people are absorbing it through, because stand-up is a live performance, and most people are absorbing this on their phone on Netflix where they could just turn it off. But this wasn't even that. This was a few minutes of a wink. Hey, didn't I trigger you here? All right, knock yourself out. Write a nice article about that. And then he went on with the rest of the show. And it was overall, like, it was pleasant. It was enjoyable. Probably one of his more forgettable specials. I don't think it was intended to be a masterwork. But hey, if you're Dave Chappelle and they'll pay you millions of dollars to tell a few fun personal stories, do it. Fuck it, I got some personal stories I could tell for $1 million.
And just on a side note, okay, so as I've mentioned, The artist, Ryan Long satirized this so brilliantly, the actor trying to figure out if he's pro-Israel or pro-Palestine because he doesn't know what's better for his career. Okay, so I literally saw the people in the arts I know go through that, and then they just shut the fuck up about the whole subject. They don't say a goddamn word about this ongoing genocide, but they all fucking had something to say about Chappelle doing this special. They have not said shit about a fucking genocide in their lifetime for fear it's going to hurt their careers. But they could not jump up fast enough to virtue signal off this special.
Yeah, it's a great observation. I mean, that's them in a nutshell.
Please clap.